Mr. Salman Khurshid, we welcome you to a discussion on the current situation in Afghanistan, a land that now occupies global attention. The virtual discussion for Pragati Vichar at this year's Delhi Book Fair is part of this. For the uninitiated, Mr. Khurshid was the former External Affairs Minister of India. Thank you, Mr. Khurshid, for sparing your time. First of all, we have a new government in place in Kabul. In what way should India now engage with this government in Afghanistan?
Well, very technically, there isn't a new government as yet, I'm told, because some negotiations are going on. And I believe that there's a possibility that Mr. Abdula Abdula and Mr. Hamid Karzai will still participate in some form of discussion. Mr. Dostum has given a signal that he would want to participate in an inclusive government. Let's see what happens. So, as far as Kabul is concerned, it's in control of the Taliban, but and they're calling the shots to the extent possible. But what structure of government will finally emerge, I think you need to wait for a few days. It'll become apparent pretty soon. But the implications of a Taliban takeover in most parts of the country, minus perhaps Panjshir Valley and so on, that's quite apparent now. They are in control, they are in the streets, and obviously that's a reality that we have to accept.
Then what is their interest in making an inclusive government, especially with Dostum's faction in the northern territories, reviving the Northern Alliance and such things? Why would they make concessions?
Well, I see there is a choice between civil war and some kind of an agreed stable government. They've had an experience of instability. They've had an experience of being the worldwide pariahs, and I think that they would want greater legitimacy, acceptability, particularly now that they are, in a sense, working as, shall we call, remote partners of the US. US was their main adversary, but the US is in negotiation with them. The CIA chief has gone and met with them. So I would imagine that US, not just limited to the evacuation process that in a sense should come to an end on the 31st, but for things beyond 31st as well, US is going to continue to be in touch with them in a different manner, and therefore all this may have an overall direction that it gives. We still don't know. They've indicated yesterday that they would be happy to cooperate with India. I hope that there is substance in what they have said. Other countries are engaging them. The Germans have to some extent, and the Russians have to some extent. Chinese have in a big way. So it can't be that they will talk and yet conduct themselves in a manner which will embarrass those that they are talking with. So I think sooner or later it will become apparent as to what kind of government we will see in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, and to what level and what kind of connectivity or communication or legitimacy we will accept that they have, and then work accordingly.
Can the Taliban be engaged with in any constructive way by New Delhi without taking into account Pakistan? What should be our strategy on that front?
Well, I see Pakistan is the elephant in the room. We've made efforts in the past to think of strategic peace and quiet with Pakistan, but it hasn't happened. It's not popular today in our country, such a position, and the present government doesn't allow it to be more acceptable, but practical reality says that you keep fighting next door, you're just inviting troubles for yourself. But be that as it may, for the present we will have to see Pakistan continuing to be in an adversarial mood as far as India is concerned, and from what we have seen, in a little bit of a celebratory mood about Taliban takeover of Kabul. So we factor that in. Also, we'll have to factor in whatever the conduct of Taliban is, particularly with Indians who are still left in Afghanistan, the contribution that India has made to infrastructure in Afghanistan, and ultimately as to what significant messages they send about transparency, about equality, about dignity, how women are dealt with. It's one thing to say that women will have freedom under the law, the Sharia law, is all very well, but what is their interpretation of Sharia law? I think all that will have to be factored into how we approach them in the weeks and months to come.
In recent years, we have seen with this government in power in New Delhi, they've been seeking alternative ways into the Muslim-dominated world, apart from Pakistan, which is to Saudi Arabia, to even to Iran. And it is amazing that with the exception of Qatar, not one country has come forward to involve themselves actively in the current situation.
In Afghanistan? Well, there is a great deal of suspicion, if that's the right word, disquiet perhaps, about these movements that are labeled as being movements inspired by Islamist fervor. Some of it is perhaps right, some of it is completely wrong. And this suspicion or disquiet comes from Muslim countries, from Muslim societies. It's another matter if it came from Western Christian-dominated countries, or it came from countries that had larger majorities of other religions like India and some other countries. But this is the doubt that comes from Muslim majority countries, because they have concerns. The outside world may see them as being conservative compared to Western democracies, that they are more conservative or restrictive than the standards that we tend to apply to ourselves. But we have seen enormous change happen today in the Saudi, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have seen in the past enormous transformation of the Turkish society, particularly inspired by Kemal Atatürk. We saw again in Afghanistan, we saw enormous transformation during the period when nascent democracy was being developed. So there are perceptions about Muslim societies which come from outside Muslim societies, and there are perceptions about challenge to existing Muslim societies from either an extreme right or on a socialist left populist front, etc. And there are obviously reactions that you get from each society depending on their circumstances. So that suspicion about which way Taliban will go was there. Maybe Qatar had good reasons to believe that it couldn't do them badly in any way. So they've reached out, and I hope that their reaching out will serve them well. But let's see. There are things that we imagine about the Taliban. There are things that we know from history of Taliban, the legacy of the past of Taliban. So all these have to be factored in, understood, have to unravel before we take final positions.
Was India in the right path all these years in promoting education, health through clinics, through schools, rather than the Western coalition, which wanted to go directly into the heart of their culture and and reform rights of women, going to school, going to work, and the entire the structure of their Islamic philosophy. Is that the way, or is the Indian way the better way?
Well, I have not the slightest doubt, because I was involved at one stage in the policy that we pursued in Afghanistan, and I have absolute no doubt that what we were doing there was the right thing, and it was received extremely well by people of Afghanistan. And I think we can count people of Afghanistan as very good friends of India. But what perplexes me is the swift arrival of Taliban at the capital of Afghanistan. Can understand provinces, but how quickly they moved into Kabul without any resistance at any stage in any level. Does that mean that they have widespread democratic acceptance, democratic in inverted commas, democratic acceptance or popular acceptance by the people of Afghanistan? Because it is, of course, largely a Pashtun-driven force. It's about a majority of the Pashtuns in Afghanistan, and presumably those that are on the other side of the Durand line in Pakistan. So, could this have happened without public support is a big question. And I think we haven't really been told enough about the kind of support that the Taliban have. But today they are now already facing new challenges. I mean, the bombings at Kabul airport, entrance of Kabul airport, that made really a very horrific sight of citizens being massacred, and 13 US service persons being killed. So Taliban have suddenly become the receiving end, victims, whereas we've all been seeing Taliban as the hard end of politics of Afghanistan. So how this will play out, etc., and particularly if there is a civil war and civil war is not avoided, then how this will play out will maybe change any plans that we may have today. Completely need to rework those plans.
We've had all these discussions on good Taliban, bad Taliban over the years, and now when it's come to this point, why are we still in a wait and watch policy? Does it reflect a weakness in Indian foreign policy thinking and action?
No, I think there are serious questions about Indian foreign policy. I think we've been left isolated. We've been left with nothing, despite having had such an important role in Afghanistan and a commitment and an attachment to Afghanistan. We are suddenly the outsiders. Nobody wants to really talk to us, except for the latest signals that have come from Taliban saying, no, India is important and India has a role in Southeast Asia, and therefore we will want to deal with India. If that is not just simply words, if it's part of actual policy, then we are talking about something else. Otherwise, our foreign policy seems to have lost track of what was happening, what could happen. Our inputs seem to be lacking. I think we just left too much to the imagination of United States and just assumed that we had to do nothing. The United States would take care of everything and clear the path for our future relationship with Afghanistan. Now, United States, of course, accepts that India has a role to play in Afghanistan, but if Afghanistan doesn't accept that India has a role to play, then where are we? If China doesn't accept that India has a role to play, if Russia doesn't accept that we have a role to play, if Turkey doesn't accept that we have a role to play, then where are we? And I think, therefore, the larger perspective of foreign policy is something that we need to reflect upon and reformulate.
Isn't it ironic that that it was Russia which sponsored us to the last conference on Afghanistan?
Well, with great reluctance, as you know, with great reluctance, and some statements made from the Russian establishment are not very encouraging for India. And to think that we were solid partners, Russia and India were solid partners, and that much as the Russian intervention in Afghanistan turned out to be a very unproductive intervention, and it caused Russia a great deal of suffering. But we kept, if you like, our non-aligned version, that we were with Russians, and we were against the Mujahideen. We were for the Russians. We were not happy at Americans arming the Mujahideen, but at the same time, those who escaped from Afghanistan and sought some safe havens here or protection for their families, we did provide them. Support. We allowed Afghan refugees to find space in our own country, and not by offending the Russians at all, but obviously not really supporting what was going on. And then Russia leaves. They are seen as the main enemy. I've been to museums in Kandahar and other places where the target shown is Russians. And today the Russians are reaching out and arranging conferences, and India is nowhere.
Do you think that India never really transitioned from dealing with Soviet Union to dealing with Russia?
Well, I mean, that's the larger question, and it'll be difficult for me to answer that in the context of Afghanistan, but that's a much larger question. What our relationship is with Russia, very clearly, is not the kind of relationship we had with the Soviet Union. Is that inevitable? That could have been prevented? Should we go back to it? Should we put it back on the drawing boards, etc.? These are many big questions about foreign policy.
Can India play a role as a sort of an honest broker? Because, with Russia, they have their stakes there with their vulnerable frontline states of Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. The Chinese have their Xinjiang province with a Muslim majority. Even the Iranians, they have their own people to ethnic links. The Pakistanis have their own links, which always don't turn out well. So we are the only ones who can actually be an honest broker there in the vicinity.
Well, that's a bit optimistic. I mean, Taliban have today issued a statement saying that India shouldn't interfere in internal affairs of Afghanistan. We already have that statement. There is a statement saying we know India is important and India has a role. We also have a statement saying India should not interfere in internal matters of Afghanistan. So, which ones do you accept, and how do you go forward? Honest broker would be if there is mutual acceptance, if there is consent of all parties that are concerned. I mean, I'm sure that someone like President Hamid Karzai would be very happy if India was present wherever there were negotiations. But is everybody going to be happy? Will Pakistan easily permit India to come and participate? Because if we are there, we will dominate. We will have a major role. Today we head the Security Council. We are the President of the Security Council. So for the months in which we can play this very important role, if somebody reaches out and if India plays its cards right, maybe something meaningful can come at the behest of India and at the strivings of India. We would certainly want that, but we don't even know what our government wants to do.
It appears that in two areas where we have played a role and we can play a greater role, which is, of course, we welcomed, I presume, by Taliban, health and education. There are reports that we're really not moving forward health in this COVID crisis.
No. Listen, we've got problems at home, but forget that. If we have dedicated ourselves to doing things for Afghanistan, there is reason to believe that we should continue doing them, no matter what. If there's an internal change of government,
there has been disruption.
There's a disruption because there's no communication with Taliban. So if there's no communication, how do you say, I want to go and fix your patients, if there's no communication?
I understand, for instance, the girl children or even young women, they are very comfortable, their families are comfortable with their girls coming to India to study.
I'm sure there are.
There used to be a good population in South Asian universities.
Yeah.
All this has apparently...
They're all here. They're all here. I mean, but the worst thing we can do is to tell them, go back. I mean, this is the worst thing that we can do. So we need to look after them. We must look after them. But we can't be telling them that, look, we will look after you if things work out with your government.
Isn't this soft power? Isn't this the best way to...
I know, but soft power of a government that's dominated by an idea of hard power, and really between two stools of soft power and hard power, nobody looking at us. That's not a happy situation. But let's give them a chance. Let them try and unruffle feathers, if there are feathers that are ruffled.
What is there to wait and watch in these areas? Soft power.
Who's the guy you're going to talk to?
Bollywood.
I know, no. But are you going to send Bollywood stars today to go and entertain Taliban? We don't know, and you can hardly go and entertain Hamid Karzai. So we have to first know what is it that they are willing to hear, see, and accommodate, and only then can we push it, whether it's soft power or anything else.
As we wind down, we come to your Congress party itself, which has been largely silent on the situation in Afghanistan. Congress was once a party with a grand international vision. What has changed?
Well, I'm not quite sure that we are silent. We have done some very sober questioning of the government. At the meeting of all parties gathering at Parliament, we had our own senior parliamentarians meet and put together a position paper. Yesterday, the advisory group to the Congress President met, which was attended by Dr. Manmohan Singh, the former Prime Minister, and Mr. Rahul Gandhi. And I'm just a convener, but there's a lot of important analytical discussions happened. Shashi Tharoor was there, and a lot of important analytical decisions happened. And we will keep putting certain questions to the government, hoping that each of those questions, in a very, very definite period, will be answered to our satisfaction and to the satisfaction of the rest of the opposition.
Is it unthinkable to, in a foreign policy arena where bipartisan support is necessary, for the Congress party or for a person like you who has, through your father and his ancestors, actual ethnic links to the Pashtuns and Afghanistan, and your relationship, which I know, which President Hamid Karzai, when he was there, spoke greatly about the personal equation. Why can't people like you reach out directly?
Well, that's all the past, isn't it? There's all the past. How much of that past is left intact? How much of the past is going to be restructured? How much of the past is going to be obliterated? And how do you begin a new conversation with new people? And we must first be clear in our minds that the new people are people that one can talk to. You can't just, with eyes shut, run into Afghanistan of today and then find that you've...
Is there a bipartisan approach necessary, as in the time of when Prime Minister Vajpayee took you to Geneva on Kashmir and presented a very credible and triumphant front? Unfortunately,
that's not this government style. We did that. They may have complained that we didn't do enough of it in our time, but that's not this government's style. They think they know everything, that the opposition is, according to them, always there to obstruct and intervene and interfere. So it's not their style. But if they were to reach out to the Congress, this is a national matter of national importance. The Congress will not be found wanting, even at the cost of political mileage going on the other side of the line. We would still step up whatever effort and whatever cooperation we can give to the government in this matter of Afghanistan. So in conclusion, do you see any ray of hope, optimism for India on Afghanistan? Right now the horizon is a bit dark, but then it's always darkest before dawn, so let's hope the sun will rise again and there will be light. There must be light. It's too important, it's too close to India. It's too important for us. It's very important in terms of our perceptions of ourselves, as indeed about all of South Asia and the entire region. I hope that light will come soon. We'll wait for it.
Thank you, Mr. Khurshid, for talking to us.
Thank you.